1940 में ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी की बलोच रेजिमेंट की 5वीं पलटन ज्वाइन की। हिंदुस्तानी सिपाहियों ने जापानीज का बहुत बहादुरी से मुकाबला किया और उन्हें जापानीज के हवाले कर दिया गया। हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया। गद्दारी की कोई माफी नहीं होगी।
You are charged with Indian Army Act Section 41, waging war against the king.
जब अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं? अगर जिंदा बचा उसके बाद शादी करोगी मुझसे?
Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we're focusing on the evolving US-India partnership, especially in defense and security. The Pentagon was pulled up last week by a powerful US Senate panel for not appointing its point person for India, which the panel called America's key security partner, to coordinate and expedite bilateral defense cooperation. The Senate Armed Services Committee, in its report running into more than 600 pages, has voiced concern over the growing gap between the overarching goals of the Indo-US defense ties. Helping us understand the larger implications of this development, we have in studio an esteemed panel. We have Mr. Satish Chandra, Dean at the Center for National Security and Strategic Studies, VIF, also former High Commissioner to Pakistan. Also, we have Bharat Kanard, who is a research professor at Center for Policy Research and a national security expert, and also Mr. KP Nayar, strategic analyst, joining us here. Mr. Chandra, if I could come to you first, talking about this point person. The statement, of course, made, how significant is it, in terms of defense, of course, they're talking?
Well, naturally, a point person would help because there would be greater focus. But I think really, if you look at the relationship, the defense and security area, we have come miles and miles. I mean, from the 90s where we were nowhere, today we are one of the largest importers of defense equipment from America. We are engaged in probably the widest series of military exercises with them. There is an exercise on a defense technology transfer. So we have come a big distance. We have even signed LEMOA, which is an agreement for logistic support. And we are examining 2 other of the foundational agreements to sign. So I think our defense cooperation with USA is in very good shape, and I think once the present US administration gets all its appointees in position, things can only improve.
Do you also feel so, Bharat, having a point person, though it's not a new concept or a new appointment as such when it comes to the US and India, especially in defense?
Well, look, I think there is a basic institutional reluctance in the United States to transferring technology. And that's been the case. By the way, they do not discriminate. They don't even transfer sensitive technologies to their best allies, including the United Kingdom. For instance, the Royal Navy had to actually design their own nuclear ballistic missile firing submarines because the Americans wouldn't give them the technology. So they are extremely protective of the high technologies in the military area. So for India to expect that somehow or the other we are going to get over that hump and we're going to get very new technologies, I think that would be a very wrong thing to expect. The level of technologies I think that they would clear for India, and that is apparent and evident. There's the F-16 kind of technologies, which is really late 60s, early 70s. That's really pretty dated. So I'm not so sure how much of it is going to come through. While it's all very good to expect that there'll be some movement forward, they might not obtain the kind of, the level of transfer technology certainly in defense military related areas, which we expect and hope will occur.
All right, Mr. Nayar, do you think things changing? You know, because when, do you see things changing? I'm sorry, because when Trump and Modi had met, you know, a lot of analysts were, of course, saying that this is just, you know, at the moment, these are just commitments, but the real test would really be when, if they act upon it. Do you see this as a way of acting upon it? Do you see this as the gradual step ahead?
See, having just come back from Washington 3 days ago, I find this reference by the Senate Committee on a Point Person for India in the Department of Defense very intriguing, because 75% of the Trump administration is without people. I mean, the State Department, which is our main interlocutor in Washington, it is without an Assistant Secretary of State who is the point person for India. On the day Prime Minister Modi arrived in Washington, I was there, they hastily appointed an acting Assistant Secretary, because the Assistant Secretary cannot be appointed just like that. It needs Senate confirmation. So in the State Department, there is no Assistant Secretary of State for India. There is no country director for India. There is no desk officer for India. There is in the Department of Commerce, where we have a lot of dealings on trade. The last one, the point person for global commercial markets was a person of Indian origin, Arun Kumar. He has come away and he is heading the KPMG in Bombay as country director. No replacement for him. So why this thing about defense? It's the same story everywhere. The entire Trump administration, you know, we have a new Deputy Chief of Mission, very capable officer, Santosh Jha, who took charge on 9th of July. He has nobody to meet because he has no counterparts, you know. So this is as of now a dysfunctional administration. And the Department of Defense, as Ambassador Satish Chandra said, has always had a point person. Maybe eventually somebody will come, but you know, a lot of the things that happens on the Congress are not self-motivated. Many things are done by the lobbyists. So I suspect that it is the defense companies which are pushing for this, you know. The defense company lobbies point person for India, so that defense sales can be promoted. That's my
assessment of what this statement perhaps means. You know, at the start of 2017, when Trump was just taking over Bharat, India was seen as, you know, as far as geopolitical dynamics are concerned, it was seen as a swing state. Is it still being viewed as a swing state, or do you think in the past 6-7 months now, and also in terms of the meeting with Trump, Modi's meeting with Trump, do you think now US-India relations, or for that matter, can we call India a US ally now, like a solid US ally?
Look, I think it'd be too much to say that India is an ally, or even that it's a substantive partner. In the United States, one should understand that, you know, doesn't deal with equals, any ally or partners as equals. It doesn't. The only equal nation that it deals with are rivals, like Russia or China. So in India is unlikely to be treated differently other than as a client state, as it were. Let's be, you know, I'm putting a very, you know, sort of value-laden word to it. But the fact is that if you depend on the United States in any crucial ways, like military technology and so on, then you basically then are hostage to their policy whims and fancies. Now, the problem with the Trump administration is it hasn't got its policy line very clear at all. For the reasons mentioned, most of the staffing is not done. The so-called plum book postings, which is all the higher level administration officials, are vacant. They have to go through the Senate confirmation and so on. They have to be nominated. No one wants to come into the administration. Earlier they had a problem of trying to attract good people. So you have professional foreign service and other service people trying to be accommodated in these acting roles and so on. So they are really at 6s and 7s as far as the policy process goes. So unless that is settled, and I don't think that's going to be very soon. Why? Because Trump himself as you're aware, is now engaged in all kinds of problems, dealing with his own family and investigations into their relations with the Russian, contacts and so on.
He's having issues even domestically as far as politics is concerned.
So, India is not really all that important then when your own survival is at stake.
Yes.
And Trump, certainly his administration's credibility is at stake, his family, prestige and reputation is at stake. He's hardly going to concern himself with India. So India is a very low priority. Even otherwise,
yes.
Even assuming you get into the act, you will have NATO, Japan, China, Russia as a priority areas where he'll focus his attention on. India comes way down the list.
Okay.
So let's not jump to conclusion that suddenly things are going to open up and everything is going to be hunky-dory and so on. But that said, I think a good start has been made in the personal sense, and that's very valuable as far as Trump is concerned, especially in his personal relations with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Yes.
I think you could see the kind of rapport that the Indian leader established with his American
just
counterpart.
here in India's world, when we discussed India-US relations, during Modi and Trump's visit time, the very fact that Trump gave a green signal to Modi in a sense of receiving him and no snarky statements, no behind the back, any kind of statements. That in itself was a good indication that, yes, let's go ahead. India seems to be a decent partner at this point of time. Do you agree, though, with what Bharat's assessment is, at least at the moment, Mr. Chandra, of how India-US relations stand?
As I see it, India is not looking for an alliance. Countries come together on issues when there's convergence. There are many issues on which there is convergence for us with the United States. And on those issues, we will be with them and they will be with us. But alliance, I don't think we are looking for it. The commonalities of interests are, for instance, you spoke about it in the beginning, on the defense side. There is a massive interest in the US on weapon sales, for instance. On transfer of technology, I have a little different view from Bharat. I agree with him that the United States, and in fact very few other countries, do transfer of technology flat. But at least starts were made of certain areas in which they could consider transfer of technology, aircraft carrier manufacturer, etc., etc. They were listed out. I don't know how much progress has been made, but certainly the intent is there. And what changed in this entire relationship, and that's why I referred ab initio to the early 90s where in fact they were looking at containing India in a sense. A change took place in the beginning of this century after the next steps and then the nuclear deal with them, in terms of a readiness to transfer technology. Now this will of course be gradual. This will be, in some areas they won't do it, but in some areas it could happen, and this depends on us also. So these are areas of convergence. Trade is another very major area, and you spoke of swing states. The prediction made by a very important economist from the US who is of Indian origin, Jagdish Sheth from Emory University, he has made a projection that the largest influx of foreign direct investment is going to be made in India in the coming years, and no other country. And automatically India then becomes a huge market, a huge area, and that's where there is a major convergence also. So these are areas. Terrorism is another area of convergence. So there are any number of areas, but equally, and that's where Bharat is right, equally there are many areas where there may even be differences. So we will have to play this. My own belief is that India should not look at allied status with anybody. India should build up its own comprehensive national power, which includes the military, the economy, health, education, the entire works, and work as we have worked as an independent country and not as a client state. And we will find countries coming to us.
All right. We'll continue this discussion forward in just a bit. We'll take a quick break. Here we back on India's World. Welcome back on India's World. Before the break, gentlemen, we were talking about how India, of course, doesn't need an alliance. It's not looking at an, as an alliance position. But having said that, let's take a look at how other countries, of course, viewing the India-US relationship. We had Mr. Kanard, the Malabar exercises that took place, and that was huge in terms of the participation, and that also India, US, Japan. How will China be viewing this? Is there a flip side to this sort of increasing bonhomie between India and US? Fine, they're not allies at this point of time, but we can't deny that defense, at least in terms of defense, business has increased manifold from 0 to perhaps $14 billion in the past 10 years, if you could say so. How are the other countries viewing it?
No, I think principally the Malabar exercise was directed at China. The idea has always been to contain China, because that's the primary threat that everybody envisages, not just in the present time, but in the future as well, because China is going to grow far more powerful, wealthier, and so on, and will be able to then deploy bigger, more sophisticated military forces, and in the Indian Ocean. So one of the things that Malabar did was concentrate on anti-submarine warfare, for instance. And that's a good thing, because just as Malabar was getting underway, there was a news report that suggested that a whole bunch, there was a surge of Chinese nuclear, both one nuclear and other conventional submarines into the Indian Ocean. So that's the kind of threat that we are going to face. That said, I think the other countries in the Indian Ocean littoral, certainly in Southeast Asia, would be very interested in having this exercise grow into a multilateral exercise, which also includes them. And I think India should take the initiative to get these smaller countries to participate, perhaps not in as ample a measure as the three main countries do, but get them to be part of the exercise. It's unfortunate, though, in this one little thing, because you mentioned Malabar, that Australia, which had sought participation, Delhi negatived its participation. Now, I never understood why it is that if the aim is to, in some sense, strategically discomfort China, if there are countries like Australia wishing to get on board, why would Delhi, for whatever reasons, and whatever the reasons that are then trotted out, why would Delhi then say no? You can merely have an observer status and have your officers on deck of some participating ships on the quarterdeck. I mean, get the Royal Australian Navy in, get the ships in, all because all you're trying to do is build up a critical mass against China. So what is the hesitation? I've never understood it. So that was the slight negative as I saw it, but otherwise it was a tremendous operation. And I think China, therefore, if you saw Doklam, one of the reasons that they have been pushing Indian buttons, as it were, on the plateau is precisely as a reaction to the Malabar exercise, to suggest to India, hey, we are there and we can, try to pressure you. And that's what's happened, basically. But by itself, it's a growing exercise. But as I said, we ought to include other Asian states who want to be included, who want to participate, and who think their security would be bolstered if they were to join in the Malabar exercise, because it's the premier exercise in Asia.
All right. Mr. Nayar, how do you see, one, of course, we are seeing how China, of course, reacted to the Malabar exercises. And apart from that as well, let's in fact take Pakistan too. When India becomes closer to the US and US says, as far as defense spending is concerned, as far as our contribution goes, we're going to cut it. You name certain terrorist organizations, you name certain terrorist personalities, and you say they're on such and such list, and you say that Pakistan is a terror haven. What kind of reactions do that, somehow, how does it spill on to India? And is that the flip side of, being friendly with the US?
See, Pakistan's relations with the US, I think, has to be de-linked completely with what India is doing. Because contrary to the popular perception in our country, whatever happens, Pakistan will be an ally of the United States. Because United States needs Pakistan for strategic reasons, I mean, gateway to Afghanistan, number of other things. Besides, it's a relationship that goes a very, very,
But recently, the Senate
time.
panel also suggested that India perhaps should get a larger role in Afghanistan. So, do you see,
Well,
or are these just statements that are made, but on the ground things are of course different?
Well, left to themselves, the Americans would very much like India to come and clean up the mess they have made of Afghanistan. But I think so far our government now and previous governments, successive governments, have been smart enough not to get involved in Afghanistan.
Yes.
So the US would like, I mean, despite Pakistan's reservations about a greater Indian role in Afghanistan, the Americans would like greater involvement in one form or another, to the extent that it doesn't upset Pakistan. But as I said, you know, Pakistan needs to be delinked. But traditionally, historically, we have been quite smart in calibrating the US relationship vis-a-vis China, you know. I mean, after the nuclear tests, for example, Mr. Chandra was in, Ambassador Satish Chandra was in the government at that time. We very effectively actually calibrated the relationship with China, using the United States relationship with the US as a counterweight. When then Defense Minister George Fernandez described China as India's #1 enemy. No, it's something that has to be very delicately balanced. It could easily get out of hand, as it may have happened in the case of Doklam. But you know, playing one against the other is not a bad idea. And India's strategic independence allows India to do these things quite effectively, and we need to preserve the strategic independence, and that's why we should not become an ally of the United States. In any case, nobody is asking, you know, there is this impression, but nobody is asking India to become, United States is certainly not asking India to become its ally.
All right, Mr. Chandra, you know, a US official, Cara Abercrombie, last month had said that, you know, as far as US-India relations are concerned, we've just scratched the surface. You know, now of course, now that we've reflected upon how the Trump administration, at least 75% of it is still empty, there's of course a lot more that they need to achieve from that part as well. But just talking about relations, talking about ties, not just in defense, do you agree we've just scratched the surface, there's lots more that still to come?
No, naturally there is a lot more to be done, but I think if you look at it in the background from where we have come, and you take a start point of the early 1990s to today, we've come a long way. I was just mentioning to you earlier that if you look at the areas in which dialogue is taking place as we speak, it is huge. There are talks on education to defense, from health to high tech, etc. The entire lot, there is a lot of vibrance in the relationship, but Abercrombie is, if he said that, is right, because the potential is huge also. Where we need to get to is much greater. And for example, if you look at what Trump is doing to economics in the United States, we have to see how do we manage the trade relationship. We have a visa issue, but on the high-tech trade, how do we get ahead? How do we overcome those problems? And what Trump is really saying, and there was a very interesting article by Dr. Jagdish Seth, an economist from Emory College, Emory University, who said that what he is going to do is force the vertical integration of production within countries, within companies. Now, this will destroy globalization as we know it. How do we address it? So, these are the newer issues which there could be opportunities, but we have to grasp those opportunities.
Absolutely.
And see how do we progress this relationship further.
Mr. Nayar,
by the way, I just wanted to say I fully agree with what Bharat was saying on those Malabar exercises. Not only Australia, but all friendly countries.
It was an opportunity missed.
It is an opportunity. No, there'll be the next round.
Yes, that's right. But
so
for that,
I think that is the route that we need to, that we must take.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Nayar, finally, what do you see apart from defense anywhere else where India and the US, collaborate further? Do you see in the next few years, where is it that we'll be perhaps getting closer?
Well, the opportunities are immense. The sky is the limit for India's relations with not only the United States, for any country with the potential to cooperate. But we need to have an agenda. We need to be clear about what we want to do. I wouldn't, for example, give any credence to Abercrombie's statement, because many of us who have covered foreign policy in Delhi know her. She was a political officer here. When she was a political officer here at the US Embassy, she used to say nice things about India. Then she went to Islamabad. She was political officer in Islamabad. She said the exact opposite things when she was political officer there. And now she is Assistant Secretary of Defense for South Asia. So, what we need to do is to get beyond statements, because statements in Indo-US relations don't really mean anything. When Prime Minister Manmohan Singh got the first state dinner, somebody very senior in our government told me, the week before there was the strategic and economic dialogue with China. So this person in the government, off the record, he told me that, China got high technology from this. All we got from the Americans was a state dinner, So we need to go beyond this into substantive areas.
All right. So we'll have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this discussion. That's all we have for you on In This World. Thank you.